Hello and welcome to this emergency broadcast of Spy Hard's podcast. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, haunted by visions of giant spiders.
I was thinking of giant worms.
I was going for the deep cut.
Okay. I'll stick to worms because I know the Dune books, which I think is something we're going to come back to.
Eh,
Um, we've assembled a team. We're going to get to that in a second. But Cam, why are we putting out this emergency episode of Spy Hards?
because it was announced the night before today, the time of recording, that Denis Villeneuve would be directing the next Bond film, Bond 26, the first Amazon James Bond film.
I sincerely hope they keep the title Bond 26.
Well, I mean,
Just leave it at that.
you know,
Who needs imagination?
I felt like No Time to Die was kind of like wandering into almost cliche territory. So
Mm.
maybe it's time to just go with the numbered approach, like Survivor.
Do it with Roman numerals, though. Let's make it
Classier.
classy. Yeah, exactly. And because it is an emergency broadcast, we needed some actual experts in the room because, frankly, Cam and I know next to nothing, and we've been doing this for 5 years. So that really does show to you how we've improved. Joining us at the round table, first and foremost, making his. I can't even keep count now how many times this man's been on the show, and we can't wait for the next time he comes back again. It is editor in chief at Fangoria. It is Mr. Phil Nobile Jr. Hello, Phil.
Hello, thanks for having me. You make it sound like I've been on so many times, but I think we're just bad with numbers because it's like three, right?
I think it is three.
Like maybe three. Um, but it gets a little blurry, the COVID years. It's always a fun time to talk to you guys, and I was so excited to hear you call me up and ask to join this emergency podcast. I love an emergency podcast.
It's the best kind. There's
I
like no
love it.
rules
Yeah,
here.
I'm
Free
here
flowing.
for it. Yeah,
Well, there's
exciting
a lot to
times.
discuss. We'll get into that. But the other member of our roundtable, again, umpteenth time she's been on the show. I think this is the second time in about 3 months,
Mhm.
returning to the show, voice actor and game casting director. It is the one and only Miss Kathryn Vinclair.
Hello, guys. Nice to be back.
Welcome back. What do you think? Roman numerals or numbers?
I think Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Ah,
Ooh.
mm. Tying into Dune as well. We're keeping it like biblical. I like that.
Exactly.
Deserty. All right. So yeah, the bomb dropped, as it were. Denis Villeneuve. We've all debated this off air. That's how we're pronouncing his name, and that's the line in the sand now, everyone. We can't get it wrong. No pressure. He's directing Bond 26. We've got the first choice from the powers that be at Amazon for what they're doing with Bond, and that is a director. There are going to be other decisions along the way, like scripts and screenwriters and actors, which will be another big one. But directors set the tone in many ways. And so I think the first question I think we need to sort of tackle is our initial gut response to hearing Denis Villeneuve is taking over the reins of Bond 26. So I'm going to throw it to you first, Phil. You've been a lover of Bond all your life. What did you think of the news?
My first reaction was, oh no. And I don't know how much detail you want behind that, but this is a I guess the way I can crystallize it is that I thought Mr. V Denis would have done a great Craig era Bond film. I find it to be a baffling choice for a reinvention.
Interesting. Okay. So is that coming from sort of a tonality of what he's put out before and sort of thinking of what the Daniel Craig era films were like?
Yeah, and he's a fan favorite because he's mentioned in a lot of the same breaths as Christopher Nolan on wish lists, and I think that what we got for 10 plus years was a Chris Nolan-esque, Denis Villeneuve-esque serious Bond franchise. And I've been banging a drum for a while now that for the franchise to continue, they need to go a little lighter. They need to wave in 12-year-olds. They need to make this a fun franchise for a new generation. And when you look at Denis' filmography, I don't see that there. I see prestige. I see auteurship. I see uh, I see the kind of prestige and clout and Oscar bait that the Broccoli's had been chasing for since the Sam Mendes days. And I gotta say I was a little deflated by that. I thought we were going to get a new Bond, and I mean, I will be happy to be wrong, but I don't see that in his career. Sicario, Enemy, the Dune movies. This is a lot of. I was about to say joyless, but that's not the right word. This is a lot of dour, dark stuff and heavy stuff, and I don't think we're going to get a lighthearted pivot that I was sort of hoping the franchise might take.
I do wonder if the casting is indicative of what we will see. Not casting, but I mean choice of director. And I think we'll come to that as one of the further sort of topics. But Kathryn, what was your gut reaction?
Well, I think at first I was just pleased because Arrival and Sicario are two of my favorite films. I think they're absolute masterpieces. And I'd be interested to see Villeneuve bring a sense of gravitas to Bond. And I was immediately thinking of Blade Runner 2049 and how I prefer that film to the original Blade Runner, controversial opinion, because I felt like Denis took something really precious and understood everything that made the first film so great, and then built upon it for a modern audience in a way that was respectful of everything that was so cherished about the original. So in my mind, I'm thinking, this is at the very least a safe pair of hands. He's someone that's going to be respectful of what the fans enjoy about Bond. But I must admit, very, very quickly after those thoughts, a lot of my concerns echo Phil's. I was hoping for a slightly more light-hearted Brosnan, Moore-esque Bond this time around, because we've had a lot of dark, grim, Bond being Batman style stories in the Craig era, and I was hoping for a bit more light. But listen, he might surprise us.
I mean, it's one of the overarching themes of the entire Dune story is stagnation and surprise. And he loves those books. So maybe he is looking to avoid stagnation. He is looking to surprise us. We don't know. And that's a good sentiment there, Kathryn. I think, we don't know. There is always hope. And it is interesting because one thing the listeners don't know is we didn't discuss this for 20 minutes before we started the recording. I haven't asked any of you, even Cam, I haven't asked him what he thought of it. We've been texting all day about putting this together, but I haven't actually once go, hey, Cam, what did you think? So I have no idea what he's about to say. And I was actually expecting the Kathryn and Phil to be actually more on the positive side of things. It was an interesting start with the energy there and both where you're coming from. So I'll throw it over to you, Cam. Where are you coming at this from?
I was really conflicted when I saw this. On one hand, if you've seen any film that Villeneuve has made, every dollar is on the screen. The film craft is impeccable. And so if you're going to get someone to make a Bond film that is probably the best looking Bond film you're ever going to get, he'll probably be the one to do it. And the fact that he's so enthusiastic about the franchise and, talks about seeing all the way back to Dr. No, I'm like, okay, well, he's someone who's going to have a lot of integrity when it comes to actually handling the franchise, which is a very good thing. And they'll be hands off with him, more or less. I mean, he'll be coming off the Dune trilogy, and it's not a bad thing to have someone that is able to kind of do what they want to do with Bond without having a million people telling him what to do. That's a good thing. But I was also like Kathryn and Phil. I did have that kind of deflated sense of, oh, they really have the if it's not broke, don't fix it approach, which is audiences like the Craig films. Let's not change the energy too much and let's stick with that kind of self-serious Bond. And I really was hoping there would be a little more of a kind of appreciation for the comedic angles of Bond or just the levity. And I mean, there's not a lot of comedy or even lightness in any Denis Villeneuve movie. I mean, I look at some of the comic banter in the first Dune, and I was not that impressed with that aspect of the film. That's not what I think people walked out raving about.
Did
And
it have any?
I feel like with Jason Momoa, I heard a few people say, "Oh, I found him funny," and I'm like, "Really?
I don't think that was the intention. I think that's actually worse.
Uh-oh. But
Yeah, the slapstick with the sandworms was phenomenal.
The Benny Hill chase through the dunes of Arrakis was just a bit too much for me.
I mean, I guess Javier Bardem is going for some comedic elements in his performance in the second one, but it's not the kind of thing. Well, there's a little bit there. There is sort of oh boy, just a very like kind of grim and methodically paced approach that Villeneuve takes. Then I tend to like Bonds that have a little bit of lightness. They don't have to be full, Roger Moore comedy, but I like some lightness, and I also like them to move. And his movies typically are very methodical, and I've been immersed in a lot of them. I've loved a lot of them, but they're not what I think of when I think James Bond.
I get everything you're saying, and I don't think I would bite back on any particular comment. It's interesting that all three of you are sort of echoing relatively the same sentiment, and I think I'm going to be the lone dissenting voice here, and I'll tell you for why. Like, I completely understand the concern of this. Denis is known for perhaps a bit more of a serious tone with his films. There's no reason why he can't do something that is potentially lighter, especially if he is a fan of the earlier Bonds. I think for me, what gives me hope is the fact that I think being a Dune book fan helps me here, because I've seen the reverence he's given to the source material in making those films. He's changed bits and bobs, and I'm sure he will change bits and bobs in Dune Messiah or Dune 3 or whatever he chooses to call it. But I get that Dune meant a lot to him, and I understand that Bond means a lot to him. I think he will do what is inevitably right for whatever Bond 26 is, if that is meaning it becomes another self-serious film, or there is somewhat of a walking the line between the types of tones. You think about Pierce Brosnan, the name came up before. Pierce Brosnan was an amalgamation of everything that came before. It was Roger Moore was too silly, then they fluxed back to Timothy Dalton, he was too serious, and then they found a balance. Maybe his Bond will be somewhat serious, but will have that air of Roger Moore in him, or something slightly funny. And I hope he can do that. And I think he is probably one of the better choices for someone who could come in and say, no, I want to do it this way, and do it. Because I could see them all, Amazon wanting to come out swinging and have this big splashy name, Denis Villeneuve, directing Bond 26. But I think if you hire someone like that, you're going to get someone who has a particular vision and has pitched that vision, and he is confident in it. And so what I'm hoping is his reverence and his confidence in his skill, and I think the somewhat of a hands-off nature he'll get will mean we will probably get a very good film. It may not be the tonal film that people are necessarily looking for, but I don't think people were necessarily looking for Casino Royale 2006 when it came out. But then it came out, and now people will argue a lot, but a lot of people will probably agree that Casino Royale is maybe the best Bond film of all time.
Definitely one that's considered up there, yeah. And I do
Yeah.
feel like there is a little bit of still Skyfall chasing, because Skyfall grossed over $1 billion and was an absolute phenomenon. And I think there is a sense of like, let's merge those serious sensibilities with sort of pulpy Bond elements, and maybe we can achieve that again.
And I think that's probably part of what Amazon want, is to have a splashy Bond film that does well at the Oscars and does well with critics, but also does well with fans. I think that old recipe of light chocolate, dark chocolate that people always bring up, I don't know where that whole idea comes from. I can't remember where the concept came from, but I think it will just infect this production, and it will. I think that's probably staking my reputation on it being a little bit lighter than the Daniel Craig films. I think I'd be willing to do that, but that's just a guess. I don't know.
It also wouldn't take much for a film to be lighter than the Daniel Craig Bonds.
Fair enough. I guess, so the other kind of weight of this decision that is interesting to me is that, so now Denis, who again, like, we can hope he goes lighter, or hope he's got a new take or a new tone, but if it's sort of what I suspect it's going to be, it's going to impact the next decade. He's going to pick your M, he's going to pick your Bond, he's going to pick your Q and your Moneypenny, and like, he's going to set the tone for what follows. I know there's some variants from Casino Royale to No Time to Die, but the die was cast with that film, and that historically is a lot of in the hands of the director. That was the case under Eon. I don't know if it is anymore, but the good thing, I think, try to find something good here, even though I'm on the negative side, is that Denis Villeneuve attracts top quality talent, right? And so you're going to get a Bond film that's stacked in a way that we maybe have never seen before. which is kind of interesting. I think it's just a bit of whiplash because I think we were all expecting a return to a journeyman director and a return to sort of the hired gun, producer-driven franchise, and to see like someone who's sort of known for their strong vision coming in to reset the whole thing. Do you know what I mean? Like even Martin Campbell didn't have that kind of sort of calcified or solidified vibe or reputation.
Pedigree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's going to be interesting. The long-term effects of hiring him are something we can only speculate on, but I suspect are going to be kind of massive.
Well, I think you're exactly right. It's a ripple effect. I mean, he's brought a producer along with him as well, but um, Denis will oversee who is Bond, who is the whole, cavalcade of Bond friends, the person who's going to play Felix Leiter necessarily for the next X amount of films if they do
Yes.
the sticking with the same actor, if they go that way. And so his decisions are paramount. But then I also think like flexing that around for a second, I think it's important to have gone the route of going a director with pedigree like Denis, as opposed to going the journeyman route for the first film, because they need to come out of the gates strong. There's already a pessimism in the air. There's already like, oh, Amazon, like really? It's not the family production anymore. Like it's just this place that sends me packages next day. Like what is that? I think they needed to come out strong, and by putting him on there, I think it sends a message that we do mean business.
Amazon is better off with a safe pair of hands that gets it right compared to a more experimental director where there's a chance that they might get it wrong and completely screw up public faith in a future Bond. But something that really struck me is when I think of Denis Villeneuve, I think cinema. I don't think streaming. And if you think about the history of Bond being so integral and correlating directly to the success of the British film industry for decades. Now we're in an era where cinemas are struggling beyond belief, even for the biggest blockbusters to get bums on seats. I was looking at Denis Villeneuve's agent, Claude Girard, has a listing for Denis Villeneuve, as if we were just going to hire him for fun, like any other creative. And in the bio, after the massive list of huge achievements and just, it's just a list of awards, it says Villeneuve is known for his continued support of the in-theatre experience. So his agent is directly pushing the consensus that Villeneuve is there to bring people back to the cinema. And I am at the very least pleased that we have a director who's going to want to put the emphasis on the cinematic experience and not the at-home streaming experience for Bond.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure Cam will. When COVID happened, the lockdown was in place. Originally, they were going to put Dune Part 1 out on HBO, and Denis fought back at that and made it come out in theaters first.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that speaks pretty consistently with that.
Well, and that also is, any concern people had about Amazon making Bond into a, 1 week in theaters and then exclusive on Amazon only. I think you can throw that out the window. That's not happening. They have brought in a filmmaker who is not going to be supporting that and would not have signed on if that is part of the agreement.
Oh yeah, I think that firmly cements it, getting a full theatrical release. I wouldn't be surprised if it appears on Amazon Prime after 2 months, perhaps, but I think it is getting a firm cinema run for sure. And also, like IMAX, like, that's a discussion, and there's not been many Bond films that can say IMAX. There's been a few, but it's not been. It's only a recent thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was a bit curious about Amazon bringing such a cinematic director into the fore, when surely they want people to be streaming it at home and making money that way. But now that they actually own the creative IP, they're going to make a lot of money anyway, regardless of how it's distributed.
Well, I think that actually, thank you, Kathryn. That guides me beautifully into my next question, which is on the Amazon side of things. What is this choice, the choice of bringing Denis in? What is that saying about Amazon's intentions with the franchise going forward? What sort of signal is that sending us? I'll throw to you first, Cam.
I was concerned initially, and we talked a lot about that in the emergency podcast we did about the Amazon taking over the creative aspect of James Bond, which is, are they going to treat this like something they could just exploit just cause? And you had Jeff Bezos on X asking everyone, who do you want to be the next Bond? And you're going, oh no. Oh no, like this is a concern. We're going to be getting the Felix Leiter show, the Monty Penny show, and all these other things just immediately spun off. And to me, like this announcement actually changed my thinking here, where I thought, okay, they are taking this incredibly seriously. And maybe it's because they've seen the floundering of Marvel over the last while, or the way that Star Wars, which was once like the unstoppable juggernaut of a franchise, has been diluted by overuse. Maybe they have recognized that and said, okay, we cannot screw this up. If we screw this movie up, what did we spend this money on? Like we've wasted this entire, investment. And so bringing him on shows to me that they are going to take a bit of a gamble, but it's a very calculated gamble on someone who is going to be enough of a draw that when you put it in theaters, when you have trailers, for example, in advance from the director of Dune, Bond 26 or whatever the hell they call it, that is something where it's like, okay, they are putting out something they want to stand out in the marketplace and is something that hopefully they have a similar exclusivity sort of approach that the Broccoli's had, which is we're going to bring in prestige filmmakers. I don't know how long Villeneuve is going to stick around, but the idea could be that we want them to come on, take over Bond, and we want these to be events as opposed to something where it's like, okay, bring in a new director every year.
What about you, Phil?
Oh gosh, I think one of the big things they were saying by hiring him is that they're not in any hurry. This announcement happens yesterday, and in about a month, he's going to start filming Dune 3. So, do the math. It's not coming anytime soon. If someone was really hauling ass, maybe you're getting a movie at the end of 2027, but it wouldn't surprise me if we don't get it till 2028. In any event, what this means, the most important thing is that I'll be the age of Roger Moore when was in A View to a Kill when the next Bond movie comes out. And I am not happy about this. And that's a sobering thought, but that means we're looking at possibly a 7-year gap between Bond films, which will break the record for the longest, right? And I guess that means they're in it for the long haul. But also, the other thing that I was thinking about the whole time last night when I was reading this announcement was that a lot of the things that I expected an announcement like this to do were kind of handled by the game announcement. The 007 game, a lot of us were like, oh, Aaron Taylor Johnson's the new Omega ambassador. This must mean something. And I was like, well, is Omega even in the next, it's all up for grabs now, right? But there's Omega very prominent in the video game trailer, and there's a lot of stuff in that trailer that seems to be like, well, we'll lure the younger kids in this way, and we'll do this grown-up thing this way. And on one level, that's cause for concern because maybe there won't be one canon. Maybe the idea of them not having one canonical Bond is something that they're exploring this way. The games, I don't need to tell you guys, video games make more money than movies sometimes now. It's a bigger business. So they might be sort of courting one marketplace demographic one way, and then this movie thing, they're still chasing us old 50-year-old fans. But I think that Amazon's plan ultimately, if you're using the Denis hiring as the tea leaves, is that they want to continue down that prestige road that Eon was going down, for better or worse. Maybe they can tweak this plan to kind of be a little more successful than Eon was, let's say creatively, in the last couple of films. Surely I don't know Eon's business better than Eon did, but I think that the last two films, I don't think it's unfair to say that they left fans a little unsatisfied in a lot of ways. And so if they can tweak that formula to give us a truly sophisticated, grown-up adult Bond that really lands and clicks, maybe that's an itch that someone has to scratch over on that side. But I'm still adjusting to the idea that they're chasing the current demographic, the grown-up prestige demographic, as opposed to like indoctrinating a new generation of fans with these films.
It's a conversation that Cam and I regularly have, and for those who haven't heard us talk about it, but Cam and I are big Star Trek convention goers, and the average age of a Star Trek convention attendee is getting older and older every year. And the shepherd of that franchise, Alex Kurtzman, has famously come out and said the Star Trek franchise is dying. We need to get new fans. And so they're making things like Starfleet Academy to bring in young adults to like Star Trek. Whether that works or not, that's a whole other thing. I have my thoughts. Probably not. But there is an acknowledgement that these franchises are getting older. So there has to be a new way of bringing things in. And yes, I think the game is actually great. We haven't spoken about it at all particularly. I think that trailer looks fantastic. But if they do go fully serious and another Craig-esque Bond, that is not, in my opinion, going to bring in a whole new wave of like GoldenEye babies, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many, like 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds really got on board the Craig era. It's tough to say.
Maybe Casino Royale, maybe.
Maybe. Although I remember my friend showed her son, like they went through all the Bond films and he loved the Connerys and the Roger Moores and all that. But when it got to like Casino Royale, he was just like, I don't understand what's going on.
Was it the poker?
The poker, what's the villain's plot, Scott?
I don't know. I know, but I'm not.
But it's not pitched in the same way as I'm going to take over the world and flood everything or take everyone to space or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's
really focusing on the Lewis Gilbert stuff there.
I really am. Yeah, not as broad.
No. Kathryn, what about you?
Could you repeat the question? I'm lost in the conversation and discussion we've had since you asked.
That's all right. It's probably best to reload it for those listening as well. The question was, what did the choice of Denis Villeneuve being made director tell us or tell you about Amazon's intentions with the franchise?
I think just that they're looking for a safe pair of hands to deliver a product. I don't want to reduce, Villeneuve's work to product and content because it's not. They are masterpieces. I want to push back a little on Phil's theory, only because I feel like a lot of the younger generations were introduced to Dune in a big way through those films in ways that the books hadn't. And I agree with you guys that not a lot of young fans were necessarily hyped for the Daniel Craig era. And when I talk to people who are, of my generation, I'm early 30s, they're reminiscing largely about classic Bond more than current day Bond. So there's definitely a market for bringing in that younger audience. But then I agree, Phil, that the younger generation is being marketed to primarily through the game. And with a director of this kind of gravitas, it really speaks to the idea of holding the Bond IP in reverence. So maybe they are just waiting for us to all age a little bit more so that we can all come out in our millions.
I mean, it does make sense that if they've got this IP, like that a company like Amazon would look at a multi-pronged approach. There's not just, and I think it's a nightmare scenario, frankly, but there's not just a Bond franchise. There is this Bond and maybe a young Bond and then a video game Bond. And there's talk of, there's a series of books where it's an old retired Bond training young new agents that's underway. And this is all against the ticking clock of Bond becoming public domain, I believe, in some corners of creativity. So there's definitely a playbook, right? But we don't have all the pages to the playbook. We don't know what their long-term plan is, and we're getting these little breadcrumbs and these little hints. And so it's kind of compelling to try to, parse what their plan is through these little announcements. But I think of course it did, but I think the video game trailer made a bigger splash than the announcement of the director in a lot of ways and in a lot of circles.
I think that the director announcement really only means much or a lot to uber nerds like us and you wonderful people listening at home. I don't think average Joe who might be going to see F1 this weekend really cares at this point who's directing Bond, because there's been so many times when franchises have had directors named that are doing X, Y, and Z, and then that's never happened. Look at the Star Wars franchise and the amount of big directors that have signed up to do absolutely nothing. Taika Waititi, when's that coming? I don't know. But interestingly, though, with the point Kathryn was making, and also to Phil's point about sort of the age brackets and stuff, I think it's with Dune specifically. I don't know. I mean, they've made a lot of fans out of Dune, but I think a lot of that is to do with casting people like Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet. Now, I don't think we're getting Timothée Chalamet as Bond, but if there's a world where Zendaya is playing a Bond girl or something like that, you could do that, or whoever is the latest Zendaya, or whoever is the latest trend of people like Sydney Sweeney or Margot Colley or something like that. Someone that's got the kids interested. They could easily do that. They have the money to splash around, which goes to my answer to the question, and also sort of ties into what Phil said about the playbook. I think what this is telling me is that they do have a playbook. Like when they took over. And I know there was like a couple of months where they had sort of ratified the deal. We've obviously gone past that point now. And so announcements are starting to happen. I think a lot of stuff is already set. I think they already kind of know what they're doing. I wouldn't be surprised if they already have an actor in mind or have already signed one. I think they know what they're doing, but they're just passing the information out slowly to build interest. Because if they just went out on, the original question was, what was my immediate reaction? My immediate reaction was I was asleep, because it was announced at 4 a.m. or whatever it was, and like that's an anathema to Bond, because it should be announced on British time, not American time.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I shouldn't be waking up to text from Cam. It should be the other way round.
I feel like we'd know a lot more about the direction that they're looking to take Bond in general if we knew whether he was signing on for 1 film or 3 or 5.
Denis,
I feel like that's going to tell us a lot more. Yes.
I think it's just, I mean, they haven't said, so I can't guess. My assumption would only be the 1. Because the producers are only signed on for 1 currently as well.
Yeah, there was like some kind of tricky wording where they said he's going to launch Bond or something along those lines. And I thought, okay, they're basically saying he's going to do the debut Bond film for this new actor under Amazon's umbrella. But it also wouldn't shock me necessarily if this movie connects, if Denis Villeneuve wants to do like a Bond trilogy with this actor, and then they do something else after that.
I mean, he's as much a fan as we are. So
Yeah.
I can see him wanting to do this almost as a passion project compared to some of the other IPs that he's taken on where there's not necessarily that childhood connection that he has to Bond.
I think like he's probably felt a bit emboldened by doing Dune, because he has been a big fan of that book series since he was young as well, and has spoken about that quite eloquently on a lot of interviews. So maybe he feels like now he can take something he loves and turn it into a modern franchise, whereas before a lot of the times they wouldn't recommend doing that, because you'd just end up being ruined by Hollywood and it would just spoil the entire adventure. Like there's a lot of examples of that happening. But yeah, so I suppose like wrapping that up, it's clear they have a playbook. It's yet to play out, I think, and we'll prognosticate a little bit more at the end of the episode, but I think there is way more to be revealed, and it will be happening over the next few months. But yeah, I also do agree with you, Phil, that you said originally that it means that they are not in a rush. We are not going to be seeing this film, I don't think, until 2028. I think that would be a pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
But we spoke about tone before. Mixed opinions. And the question I sort of prepped everyone with is, what do you expect the tone to feel like given the announcement? But let's slightly reframe that. What do you expect it will be, and what would you like it to be in terms of the tone and the feel of this next film? Phil, why don't you go first?
I think it's hard to predict because, any sort of pigeonholing of Denis would be a disservice to him, right? Clearly, he's a very talented filmmaker and very skilled, and he could ostensibly give us this sort of more lighthearted version that we've talked about. I guess my concern is he interested in that? And would he want to do that? Because his CV suggests that he is not interested in that. His movies are all pretty heavy and pretty dark. And I know there's moments of lightness in Dune but I think that his cinematic leanings are toward gravitas and operatic, heavy emotions. So it's not a matter of can he, but will he, and does he care to? That sort of kind of freaks me out, ultimately. Um, I noticed it's a canned statement for a press release, but he talked about his love of the film franchise. He didn't talk about the books. Does
Mm.
he know Fleming? Does he know? Can he put a grace note? I suppose it's the writer's job, but there's grace notes of Fleming in all of my favorite Bond films, even the ones that have strayed so far from the source material. There's a wink or a nod in there that makes me feel like, oh, that's something Fleming's Bond would do. So I'm curious how much of that will be retained. If he just grew up loving the films, that's one thing. And I was thinking yesterday how so much of Craig's run was kind of connected to riffing on what came before. Even if it was subverting what came before, it was aware of itself as part of a franchise in a way that maybe Dalton or Brosnan weren't. I don't know how to explain it. Like every Bond theme after "You Know My Name" sounds like it knows it's a Bond theme. Do you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
there's a self-reflexive or a self-awareness to the franchise that I was sort of curious if we could get away from going forward. And if Denis is just living out a childhood fantasy, maybe we're not doing that, but maybe it's going to be self-reflective of the bonds that were meaningful to him growing up. But I guess what the tone I would hope for is I'm at this point I'm looking for newness. Like what can we do with this franchise that we haven't done before? And can you make a person whose job is to kill people someone that is a likable character, or do you want to make them a likable character? How can you color inside the lines of what the character is without breaking it? And I want to see them try. Does that make sense? I just want to see what we haven't seen yet because, like I said, we're getting up there in age, and I do not have all the time in the world. So, yeah, I want to see how can we bend and rearrange the character in a way that's exciting in 2028.
It's an interesting sort of jumping off point there because newness is something that feels so scary to a lot of film producers these days, and people that we talk to when we interview people that make films. That there is a general like pushback from studios to greenlight new things. They want nostalgia. They want established characters, established touchstones for people to feel safe. And unfortunately, the proof is in the pudding because they'll put a film out like I'm sure Jurassic World's going to do gangbusters. And I think it will probably beat Formula One. Now, which is the better film remains to be seen, but I would probably argue, without seeing either of them, it's probably Formula One. And so, like, I do want to see newness, but I can also understand the concern that there might be a pull to be self-referential and reverential to what has come before. And it is interesting that in the last 2 decades, we've basically gone to this sort of well of just referencing ourselves constantly. Look, it's the Vantage. Look, it's the DB5. Look, it's all this other stuff. Whereas, like, they did it in Die Another Day. I mean, it was also pretty awful in that scene too. But like, you might get it passed out like in On Her Majesty's, where he goes in the drawer and pulls out a few little things, and even that felt like too much sometimes.
Sure.
But like, Roger going to the grave in For Your Eyes Only. Now that's a reference that meant something.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
But Roger is sort of reference free aside from that
Mm,
moment. Like
yeah.
his Bond was his own, and can we do that? I mean, I know he was only the third guy, but can we do that? Somebody said something interesting to me on social media where yesterday they said it needs to be different enough to stand on its own. Like he pointed out Matt Reeves' Batman. He said it's a great movie, but it's not different enough from what came before to really make its own mark. You know what I mean? It's still coloring inside the same. It's using the same color, crayons from the box, I guess you'd say, in a lot of ways, in terms of how it approached Gotham and the villains and Batman's sort of like vibe. It didn't feel separate enough from Nolan's to kind of distinguish itself in a way. And I guess that's my fear with a Denis Bond is that it's going to be a little similar to Craig's. But I trust that these creators have a better imagination than I do.
Oh yeah, if we can cook it up, it's probably not worth making.
Yes,
That
exactly.
yeah, because none of us are paid the big bucks to make films, at least not
Right.
currently anyway. Kathryn, what are your expectations on tone?
Well, imagine if we had a Bond that had the tension of Sicario and the emotional punch of Arrival and the sex appeal of the Bond girls of Joy in Blade Runner 2049. You know, we'd be on to an absolute god tier Bond film. So when he gets it right, he gets it so damn right. And I'm ready for him to do that. I am so ready for him to take everything that he has learnt from making all these other films and to know and understand what has resonated the most with fans of all of those films and take those elements from his existing films and put them into a sort of beautiful Frankenstein Bond. But I also know that
That's a big but.
sometimes it's a really big but. Sometimes his films can be a little overly long. They can be a little self-indulgent. They can be heavy on the sort of quiet, long takes. Um, he directs with a sense of naturalism almost, even though he's giving it, really heavy cinematography and it's all very cinema. There is still a naturalness to his direction style, and we've kind of had the gritty Bond. And again, I'm just going to echo what Phil said. I really want a bit more humor and a bit more escapism. I miss the days when watching a Bond film felt like checking into a five-star hotel in a dream holiday destination with a beautiful girl. I want a smidge of that. So that's what I'd like it to be. And I know that he can make us care about the characters, and it doesn't really matter where he takes the franchise, so long as he stays true to enough fans' visions of Bond, but gives us a reason to care about these characters on screen. If we're presented with a reinvention, if we're presented with anything being very different from what we recognize of Q or M or Bond or Moneypenny, so long as he gives us a reason to care for those characters, the new audiences will join him, and some of the legacy audiences will also be won over, I think.
I want all of the things he's done before, but I want that personally. For my answer to the question is like, I do want a serious film in the sense of a filmmaker that's taking the job seriously, but there is a part of me that does long for, and who my first Bond was, which is the Pierce Brosnan era, which I think was probably one of the perfect blends of seriousness and silliness. And even his films run the gamut of GoldenEye to Die Another Day, from brilliant to bonkers. And I know I'm using a lot of alliteration, and I don't mean to, but I suppose what I'm getting at is like, my actual concern with this is I don't know if he has it in him to have that silly streak. And as I'm having this conversation, I'm just slowly dawning on me like, can you really have both? And also, can, in this modern era, can a mildly silly Bond film even exist? Take what's come out over the last 20 years in spy movies. The last silly Bond film was 2002. Austin Powers basically nuked it, and along with Jason Bourne. And we haven't had a silly one since. And there have been silly, spy films. The Kingsman series is very silly.
Triple X.
Triple X, the OSS, the French OSS films, they've proved that you can do silly spy movies. But I will also say none of those films have ever been as popular as Bond, and have never come near them. So I'm starting to just, throughout this episode, get more and more concerned that, is it even possible to have a slightly campier, sillier Bond film nowadays?
I think Die Another Day scares like filmmakers in general. I think a lot of them are going to point to that movie and be like, we don't want to do that ever again. That's something that we cannot go back to. And, the Craig era was seen as a reaction somewhat to that. And I think that kind of attitude is still holding. I think they look and go, well, people, make fun of Moonraker and Die Another Day. Like, we don't want to do something like that again.
I think also it's not as binary as we're making it out to be. Like there's silly and camp, which I think are to be avoided. But if
Yeah.
you look at a moment, say from Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, like the introduction of Rebecca Ferguson's character, when
Hmm.
he's chained up and they're having to get out of that thing, that's a great, legitimately great action fight scene that also has beats of character and humor in it that I think you see it occasionally in Casino Royale, certainly the parkour chase and in the Macau casino fight. You know, there's humor and levity in there in Skyfall, um, but I don't I don't know that I've seen Denis do this ever, and so this seems like more of a swimming upstream toward the more serious stuff, which I think that there's an observer effect to the franchise where Casino Royale had a lot of actual humor in it, but all the press was about this Bond is serious and this Bond is legit and we can take it like he got nominated for a BAFTA. We can take this all seriously now. And then you got a very sort of not nuanced Quantum of Solace where it was more gritty and Bourne influenced at that point. I think that there were some producers who kind of believed their own press and took maybe some of the wrong lessons out of the praise of some of that stuff, and they're now not involved. So I'm wondering if some cooler heads can prevail. And you've got the guy who oversaw the Harry Potter franchise and Paddington running things. It's possible that the nuance of action and pathos, but also humor, is not this bit of alchemy that we worry it is. It's just somebody paying attention and keeping those micrometers dialed to the right frequencies that you could do. I think you could do it. I think we've seen franchises doing it. I think we just haven't seen it perfected in Bond yet in a very long time.
We're also not relying on Denis to write the script.
Hmm.
As much as he's going to have huge creative artistic sway over the tone, there's nothing stopping a team of writers putting in some lovely little Bond quips here and there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
I think one thing we're all forgetting is Amy Pascal's Spider-Man career has been mostly hilarious to watch. So there's going to be comedy here.
Well, I mean, when it comes to the Spider-Verse stuff, for sure, but or the extended Spider-Verse, but the animated films are fantastic and understand those characters. So,
I went for a joke and Cam undercut me. That's classic Spy Hards.
well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I knew you were going to take aim at the Madam Web and Craven and Hunt the Hunters of it all, but she's had some hits.
And to give Denis some credit too, in terms of the tone, I think we are meant to sort of have an uncomfortable laugh at some of the moments in Dune. Like all of the Stellan Skarsgård stuff is like you're not supposed to sit there stroking your chin going, "Oh, this is like dark and serious." You're like it's insane, and I would welcome some insanity in the Bond franchise. That's the other thing that's missing is that and that goes back to Fleming. Just the weirdness of some of the Fleming stuff has been missing for so long that if he can bring back the kink and the weirdness and the sort of borderline unhinged stuff happening in the novels to some degree and to the earlier films, I think that would go a long way toward winning me over.
And I think that's actually a very astute point I hadn't thought about until you just said it. But like, just talk about Dune for a second. Like, he has taken this material and some of the baffling stuff that's in the first Dune book, from phrases like Kwisatz Haderach and Muad'Dib and Lisan al Gaib, and actually made those phrases mean something to a general theater going audience. And he hasn't taken that from a book and changed it and iterated on it until it didn't mean anything. He's gone, no, this is exactly what the text is. I'm going to do the Gom Jabbar scene exactly like the text, even if it's confusing to people, because I love the text. So I'm hoping that is actually something part of his game plan, that he is somewhat beholden to what he is working with and is taking it very seriously and is going to present it to you and not sort of kowtow to I don't know, the lesser audiences, the people that don't need everything explained to them, or to producers, I think, and to busybodies up above. I hope he has a vision, and I assume he does.
He does at least treat his audiences like intelligent human beings with a vested interest in the wider world that he's presenting to them.
I think that again, Kathryn, you're giving me the great segues here. Like I should slip you a tenner at the end of this. It's this is some pretty good stuff.
I'll send you my PayPal.
Okay, okay. So the next sort of topic I floated in our chat was Villeneuve and discussing him as a filmmaker. So I suppose how I want to pose this question is, what is one thing that we're all excited about that Villeneuve is bringing to this film as a director? Looking back on what he's done so far, what's the sort of the mark that he's left on his film so far that you're excited to see in a Bond film? I'll go with Kathryn first.
My first thought was how much I loved Sicario, and if we can just have one sequence in the whole film that matches the intensity and the nerves, the arse-clenching, just the wildness of it. It was just relentless tension. I want one sequence where the stakes are that high and you feel it that viscerally through the screen.
Yeah, like the sequence at the airport in Casino Royale. Like, you obviously have the parkour stuff, which is just thrilling off the top, but the tension going on in that airport sequence in Casino Royale is incredible, top tier stuff, and I would like to see that kind of intensity brought to action scenes going forward.
I feel the same way when Roger Moore's watching the two nukes firing the sub, so the two
Yeah,
subs firing the nukes at each other, and he's just staring at the screen. Yeah,
yeah, it's
it
great.
gives me the same level of tension.
Great.
What about you, Phil? What's one thing you're excited that Villeneuve is bringing with him?
2 words: David Dastmalchian. David is an actor who is a friend of mine, and he has been in De Villeneuve's Prisoners. He's been in Dune. He was in Blade Runner 2049. He usually dies in a very interesting way in Denis movies. And I texted him last night and said, "Hey, congrats on the Bond villain gig." And I don't think he had heard the news yet. But it will be a personal thrill for me because I've gotten it. David wrote something for me a couple of years ago, and we became friendly after that. And he's hosted our awards show that we do every year on Shudder. It would mean so much to me if someone that I actually know gets to enter the Bond universe. I will be tickled beyond belief, and I know David would be too. I don't know if it's going to happen, but he's been in all of his movies since 2013, or 2012. So I'm hopeful that'll happen. David's such a character. I don't know if you know him, but like, he also does voice work. Kathryn, he's got such a great face. He's at least number one henchman material, but I think he's evolved past that. He deserves more at this point in his career, and my dream would be to see him as a Bond villain.
He's going to be spectacular.
Yeah, it'll be like Polka Dot Man was fantastic in the Suicide Squad.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've seen him in many movies, and he could be. It's something we talked about actually. We recently were recording our episode on The Spy Who Loved Me, which is sort of the kind of the up and down trajectory of notable henchmen. And like, that's someone who, if they made him a villain henchman, would bring a lot to that performance. And that's always a good thing.
And he would do it. He's a very no small parts kind of guy. He takes a lot of different gigs, and he was in Oppenheimer last year. He's earned his stripes, and it would be cool to see that happen. But also, and I was going to say not a joke answer, but that's not a joke answer. That's my honest first answer. But what Kathryn said as well about just the action chops that Denis has and that you see in Sicario, to bring that level of intensity to a Bond film, I think we've seen them try it, and I think we've sort of like patted Sam Mendes on the back for a sequence or two here or there, and Fukunaga did his long take on the stairs in No Time to Die. But I think that none of it comes close to what Villeneuve has done with his action sequences, his standout action sequences. So seeing that sure hand at the steering wheel would be pretty special.
Yeah, and obviously you have Tom Cruise doing the biplane stuff in Mission Impossible Fallout. You're unlikely to get another or a Bond actor to be able to do something like that. But look at the submarine sequence in that same film. And I hope that like someone like Villeneuve is looking at what Mission Impossible is doing and saying, I've got some really cool ideas I think I can pull off. A little bit of friendly competition to actually raise the bar for what Bond can do. Because it doesn't really feel like Eon was really trying to rival what Mission Impossible was able to do with their Craig era too much.
No, weirdly, the Macquarie era of Mission Impossible felt like it was like picking on Bond. Like, I'll show you a car chase in Rome, and then
Yeah,
they kind of like really kind of ate its lunch in a lot of spots. So it'll be a cool opportunity for the Bond franchise to raise its game.
yeah, yeah. I guess for me, the things I would like to see, it's Denis Villeneuve has great collaborators behind the scenes. He worked with Hans Zimmer on the Dune films.
Hmm.
Got Hans Zimmer an Oscar there. Bring back Hans Zimmer. I was interested in what he did with No Time to Die, but I also felt like that film kind of like tied one hand behind his back, where it was like, okay, we need to carry on these motifs of the Craig era, and we want all the time in the world. We want that kind of musical references going on to On Her Majesties. So I want to see like Hans Zimmer given just like free reign to do what he wants to do with a Bond score. Just run with it, and you get to kind of build the foundation for this new Bond run yourself. I think that could be great. Or, Greg Fraser, who we worked with on Dune as well. Like a lot of his collaborators have worked on Bond films under the Daniel Craig era, but I would love to see again like a very cinematic Bond. And sure, let's see what Fraser can do with this.
I think a lot of my answers have all been said. And so I think the only thing I would like to see him bring is something we've already mentioned, which his ability to not treat the audience like idiots. Like one thing I quite like about some of the newer iterations of superhero films, some of the Spider-Man did it too, is they don't feel the need to do the whole origin story thing again just to reestablish the character. One thing I want to see from this film is I don't want to see another, this is how he got his double O story. We did that with Casino Royale. I just want to see Bond on a mission.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what he might be bringing to this is the fact that he doesn't need to feel the need to do all that again. Let's just have Bond on a mission. Yes, I need to establish Bond. Yes, I need to establish a new Q, a new M, a new Moneypenny. But I can do that by them doing the job because we did it in Doctor No, and by golly, we'll do it again.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
things we don't know, like in terms of, when we were talking about tone and all that kind of thing. Are we gonna have like a 28 or 30-year-old Bond? Or not? Like, we don't know. And like a lot of the energy of the movie is gonna come from the age and kind of the baggage the actor brings to it? Or is it going to be a Cold War set Bond film? I mean, that feels like a cliche at this point to even mention. It is a cliche to mention, and yet it's something that keeps being brought up. Is that going to be something they finally pull the trigger on? That is going to affect the tone of the movie ultimately too. So who knows?
Well, according to Rolling Stone, who've just put this out, having Denis Villeneuve means, of course, Timothy Chalamet has to be Bond.
Of course.
Which I'm not sure I'm on board for.
I don't like to speak in hyperbole, but I might not watch that.
Yeah.
I would happily
Uh,
walk away from the entire franchise if that came to pass.
I should never be able to take Bond in a fight.
That's a good point.
That's the benchmark. Like Barry Nelson, I think I could maybe just get, but the rest of them.
Right. First of all, they're doing it in the game, so doing it in the film also would be a weird move.
Mhm.
But I think that like if you're Denis and you're coming to this franchise because you've been a fan your whole life, you want to Bond at full power. You don't need the rise of the hero thing. You just need three fucking movies of the rise of the hero. Like you don't need to do that again.
Mhm.
I can't imagine that would be an attractive prospect for him. Whether he's signing on for one film or three or whatever, he's not. I don't think that's why he's getting in the Bond business to stamp out all that shoe leather again. It just seems pointless.
With Amazon's ability to make multiple different iterations of parts of the universe of Bond, it now means that he's not in a position where he has to reinvent the wheel. He can just deliver Bond, the Bond that we know, in his own spin.
I hope that's what happens.
I suppose the next thing I was going to bring up is something we've already discussed, which is concern. So I don't think we need to dive back into that now.
Yeah.
I've got a question I'm going to add, but the next thing I had written down was next steps. So I mean, my assumption on next steps would be actor at this point, or like they did with No Time to Die, they announced the title, I think, before they even announced the director.
I think screenwriter would be brought in very soon. Very, very soon.
What about you guys? What do you think we're getting next from Amazon?
I reckon it'll be fill out the crew first, then release a couple of, well, then release maybe the title, and then your sort of secondary characters, and then finally Bond.
Wow. Yeah, I think sadly what's going to happen is you're going to get location leaks after the script is done. The way that those things kind of just sort of end up in like certain production guides and whatnot, then or a town notice somewhere, somebody's going to find us, that they're looking, a scout report. You're going to start hearing about after the screenwriters are announced. You're going to hear about location scouting, I think, because that's the weird spot that they can't seem to keep a lid on historically. And I guess if it's not going to film for at least a year, because it can't possibly film for a year. I wonder how soon they're going to try to hold the announcement before. Because again, all of our models are no longer in play. The way Eon used to do it isn't necessarily the way that they're going to do it anymore. So I'm curious to see what kind of flight path they're going to take on this. But I hope to hear good news about the screenwriters sooner than later. And then, yeah, the crew should sort of fill itself in kind of, as expected. Like Deakins or somebody as DP, and you're gonna get some, probably not a whole lot of surprises there, right? And then, I guess I'm not that concerned about all of that. I just wondering when we're going to hear when the new Bond is, and how is that a year off? Is that a
Right.
year off?
Well, it's like if they're going to announce an actor, does it make any sense for them in the next couple months to be like, okay, Aaron Taylor Johnson is your new Bond. See you in 3 years.
Mhm.
Like, no, it doesn't really do much good.
Or does it?
No, Scott, it doesn't.
No,
Well,
it doesn't.
just-
It's
No, probably not.
you want momentum, and there's no momentum there. It's like, well, he'll make a good Bond film one day.
I mean, that is if that's all he's doing, though.
We're also, as a fan base, we're all tired of waiting. We're all sick to death of waiting. So everyone's chomping at the bit.
There's a marketing angle and an optics angle to stringing us along with news, and there's probably a perfect time to announce the Bond, even with between now and commencement of filming. And I don't know what it is, but I am assuming someone's done the math on this and has the date on the calendar already.
You can bet your bottom dollar an algorithm has worked it out. The entity has
Not
got
the
us.
algo.
It's got us sussed out. I mean, they've got us like down to a T. All the Bond podcasts are going to be putting out episodes. Oh wait, hang on.
Yeah. Hold on, Scott.
We're pawns. We're pawns.
Damn it, we're buying into their marketing strategy. Oh no.
How many times have we said the word Amazon this evening?
Oh no. I just had a dark thought, but I won't go there. Okay, well, we did just talk about casting. One of the final questions I had before we slowly wrap us up is just a quick fire around the room, because last time we did the roundtable when Amazon was announced, we asked this question of who you'd like to see cast. The world's changed slightly, and new names have come out, and some names have gone away. The actor to play James Bond, who would, if they announce it tomorrow, it's like a Denis Villeneuve today, tomorrow it's Bond, and here it is. Who is the actor that would make you the most excited to hear is playing 007 in Bond 26 in Roman numerals? Phil, what do you think?
I don't know his name, but it's someone I've never heard of who is toiling away on some TV series right now. And I look at him and go, yes, that's the one. That's the feeling. That's the Darwinian ideal of like the Bond announcement. It's somebody that has no baggage to me. So not somebody that's been talked through the press here and back, but I look at that person and they're a grown up and I go, that's Bond. There's probably 10 guys that fit that description right now.
Oh, yeah. In terms of that, there's a handful out there. I did think you were going down the route of, I don't know his name, but I know his number.
Hey, no. I mean, sadly with the can kicked down to 2028, all the names we've heard are kind of a little stale at this point, and it's only going to be anticlimactic if they announce Aaron Taylor Johnson in a year and a half, frankly. So I want something new. I want something exciting. And I know people are, it's so tempting to pull from Denis, repertory company and say, oh, this person or this person. But I don't know that we have within his space, I don't know that we have the right person.
No, I think looking at his sort of Rolodex of actors, there's some good character actors in there that could definitely play some good parts in Bond films, but I don't think there's a Bond.
Right.
No, I would happily see Jake Gyllenhaal play a villain. That could be fun, the Bond villain. But yeah.
Cam, what's the name for you?
I don't know because it's so hard to cast anything because, just as a fan, you have a very narrow idea as to who should play Bond. You're like, who looks like Bond? But Daniel Craig didn't look like what I thought of as James Bond, and yet, became incredibly popular. And so, I mean, the other day there was the rumor, Aaron Pierre, his name kind of popped up. And I had the response of like, huh, I never would have thought of him, but that would be pretty exciting. I've seen him in a couple things now, and he was incredible both times. And he's incredibly magnetic. And if you told me he's going to play Bond, that's actually pretty exciting. He could do all the physicality stuff. He's got the charisma. And so that's not someone who is at the top of my mind for the role. And so my hope is that whoever they do pick is the same kind of response of going, oh my God, why did I not think about that? Genius.
So there's sort of an simpatico nature with Cam and Phil by giving us no name whatsoever to the question of could you give me a name?
Okay, I'll say this.
No, but I get it. Go on. Go on.
I will say this. If they were to cast Aaron Taylor Johnson, I'd be happy. He's kind of like the safe choice at this point. He's like the Pierce Brosnan being brought in to do Goldeneye. I think I would be more than entertained seeing his version of Bond. It's just like, at this point, is that like the bolt of electricity making me thrilled to see the movie immediately? No, not so much.
I think that's fair. Kathryn, can you give me a name?
No, I can't. I'm in the same camp as everyone else.
Go straight to hell, Scott.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm so much more intrigued to discover an unknown and to have someone that we have no previous preconceptions of jump into such an iconic role, because by this point, honestly, the conversation of who's the next Bond is just stale because it's been the same names being churned for years now. And if you carry that on until, however long we have to wait until an announcement, we're all going to be sick of the sight of them. Even though we know that there are some phenomenal actors in that mix. And of course we want Henry Cavill to jump in and do one before he gets too old. Or we want Aaron Taylor Johnson because we know he'd do the role justice. But come on, that there are so many more actors out there that Hollywood don't pay enough attention to that, deserve the spotlight.
We can agree we don't want Timothée Chalamet, though.
Oh yeah, Broccoli Boy needs to stay at home.
Yeah.
Broccoli Boy. Oh, bless his heart. Muad'Dib. I was to be honest, I run the Spy Hard social media, so whatever's posted is usually just my consciousness into a tweet or a post. That's why it's usually incoherent. I said it before you said it.
I was gonna say it's a stream of consciousness of a madman.
But I think if I had to name a name, I think the safest bet, I think you're right, Cam, is Aaron Taylor Johnson right now.
Yeah.
That is if cameras are going to roll early 2026.
He is young enough, to be fair, to wait 3 years, but yeah.
But I don't think they're going to roll early 2026. I think they're going to roll late 2026 for a 2028 release. I think that's how it's going to work. So I don't know if he wants to sign on as an actor for a 3 to 5 film deal that he also can't shoot for 2 to 3 years from now. And that's if there's no litigation problems or anything like that, like if it all goes according to plan. So I could see another name coming up. I could see me eating crow and being wrong, but I'm going to say right now, as of the day, date, time, and place, it is Aaron Taylor Johnson, who would, I think, be my thing. I'm happy with the safe bet. I live in the safe bet. I am the guy who bets in a 50-50 bet. I do not want to go any more risk than that. So yeah, that's it. So I think the last thing I want to do before I've got a couple of comments and people have written into us about their thoughts on it. That people who couldn't make it to the recording want to send in their thoughts as well. But I want to throw it out to the room. Final thoughts on Denis Villeneuve's casting. I think we've really covered it all. There'll be people listening that are super so stoked about it, some people that are super scared about it and don't like where this is going. Can we put them at ease? Can we excite them more? I don't know. But Phil, I'll put you up first. Is there any final thoughts, anything about this choice of a director that you haven't spoken about yet, or you just want to leave us with a thought on that?
No, I'll say that I was a lot less optimistic about it before this conversation, and then hearing some of Kathryn's thoughts about what he can bring to the table, and made me feel like I was looking a gift horse in the mouth a little bit. So I want to kind of like there's no upside to me hating it prematurely. I just
Hmm.
I had a visceral reaction. If this is what's happening, then I'm gonna try to be optimistic and I'm gonna hope for the best. I do think. I do think to me it's down to how can they reinvent it? How much can they reinvent it with while still retaining some of the Fleming DNA? And I want them to try, right? I don't want them to play it so safe that it's just pastiche and just riffing on what came before. I want to see new Bond stuff. I want to see new things happening with Bond before I die. So I hope he brings me that in a satisfying way.
Okay. Kathryn, what about you?
I'd say escapism doesn't need to be entirely nostalgia based. So if we get a big blockbuster Bond in however many years, I don't want it to just be callbacks and Easter eggs. I want it to be the atmosphere of this new film that is creating its own legacy as an instant classic within the canon. And I want it to take everything that's exciting about the modern day and make that as glistening as all of the escapism was in the early Bond films.
Yeah. No more Blofeld's brother. That kind of
No.
stuff going on, please.
No.
Good Lord. We've all got a shared trauma, I think, from that at this point. Everyone listening, everyone on this episode right now, we've all seen a therapist about that particular film at one point.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that, Kathryn. I think I think it is an exciting time. I think there is a lot of hope here, and I'm looking forward to it. I think my sentiment is more just change, movement, progression is always a good thing. That's how something I try to personally try and live by in a sense is you can always get better and you can always keep pushing forward. And the fact that something has been announced, something is moving forward, there is news, is a good thing. And we can't judge a film on the director's previous work. It gives us a sense, a taste, a flavor of what we might see. But there's no reason why Denis Villeneuve doesn't turn up and give us Austin Powers 4. You know what I mean? Like, it could be completely out of the left field. Who knows? He's obviously, but it's also whatever he's getting to do is exciting enough for this man to sign on. This man has a proven track record of great films. Whether you like the tone of it or not, different story. But I think there is positivity to take away from this. And that's what my sense is. Cam, do you have anything to add?
Well, just that I would like a surprise. And I think Denis Villeneuve is capable of making a movie that does take me by surprise, which is something that I wouldn't necessarily think if they'd gotten more of the journeyman to come in, especially if it's the kind of journeyman that we see so often doing these straight to streaming action films nowadays, where they just feel like they just gloss over your eyes. So, I know that I'm concerned about just tone-wise, more of that Craig energy going forward. But at the end of the day, when you look at the overall canon of Bond, the thing that makes it the most exciting is to kind of look at all the pieces. And it's like, oh, there's that one film that's really different. At the end of the day, we are going to have a Denis Villeneuve Bond film in the larger collection. Like it or hate it, it's always going to be interesting to talk about. It doesn't feel like it's going to be something that just kind of fades away.
Couldn't agree more. It's a new chapter, and also tying that into Kathryn's point, this is a chance for Amazon, for the filmmakers, for the producers to start a new chapter in the Bond film story. You can leave the past behind and move on. I mean, Bond just got blown to smithereens, so it's all to play for, and it's all positive in my book. Now, I said we had some messages from a couple of people who couldn't make the recording, so here are their messages. First of all, we have Logan from the Music of Bond podcast, and they say about the announcement, this is an exciting first step. Love that a true Bond fan is at the helm. Much is yet to be determined with the direction, but so far they are batting 1,000.
Boom. Yeah, there you go.
Love that. And also from Mr. Mark A. Altman, previous guest on the show and co-author of Nobody Does It Better, The Complete Uncensored Unauthorized Oral History of James Bond. Mark says, guys, sorry I couldn't be there today. I am excited by the announcement of Denis as the director of the new 007 film. He loves Bond and he's a masterful filmmaker. Checks 2 boxes off the top. He's the kind of auteur, final cut filmmaker the Broccolis would have never hired. However, it's very important to them to only hire British Commonwealth directors, and Denis is a French Canadian. While I don't think that should stand in the way of hiring a first-rate filmmaker, it's the kind of institutional memory of making of the Bond films that is now gone with Barbara and Michael no longer involved. That does worry me, but only time will tell. That said, the fact that Denis is a Bond fanatic should certainly be a positive sign to all of us that the future is encouraging for our favorite gentleman secret agent with a license to kill. I only hope that they can get back to a 2 to 3 year schedule instead of making them every decade. I imagine Amazon does as well.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think they all want more films and more money. Who doesn't?
Yes.
Who doesn't? But that has been our discussion on the news. And I just want to add before everyone signs off and I sort of talk about what we're doing next week. Cam, have you noticed a trend in our Bond episodes?
Nothing that's popping to the top of my mind. What are you thinking?
The last time we did a Bond episode, which I believe was The Man with the Golden Gun, Amazon was announced as taking over the Bond franchise, and we had to do an emergency podcast the week before it came out. Next week on the show, we're doing The Spy Who Loved Me. So what I think we should be doing is doing Moonraker in 2 weeks' time, and then we get a casting announcement, right?
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Sound logic.
Yeah, we're signaling the change here. We're signaling the change. But I want to thank our guests, Kathryn and Phil, for coming on to speak with us. I hope you've had a good time. I hope everyone's had a good time listening. Phil, where can people find more from you online and come and speak to you about Bond?
Oh gosh, I've abandoned Twitter for Blue Sky, and I'm having some fun over there. That's a new thing. But generally, you can find me at fangoria.com. I'm mostly doing the printed magazine, but you find me on the website occasionally. Mostly doing horror, but social media is where I engage in all of my passions beyond horror. So that's where to look.
We'll have links in the show notes below. Kathryn, what about you? Where can people find you?
Come say hi on Instagram at Kathryn Vinclair. Easy peasy.
It certainly is. And, you're dressed to the nines for this occasion, as always. And I believe tomorrow is Friday, and it's Formal Friday on Kathryn Vinclair's account. So that should be something to check out on Instagram. That's my secret plug.
Yeah, every week.
It's Formal Friday. There you go. Well, Cam, what are we doing next week?
Well, you set it up. We are tackling The Spy Who Loved Me from 1977, and we have a fantastic guest joining us to celebrate all things Roger Moore, Jaws, and beyond.
We're actually celebrating The Spy Who Loved Me for the month of July. It's the July Who Loved Me or The Spy Who Loved July. It's a lot going on. We haven't worked out the title, but it sounds good either way. We've got 4 interviews, at least at the moment. There might be more to come in the month, as well as the review. It's a lot going on, and there'll be more to discuss next Tuesday when the review drops. So look out for that in your podcast feeds. Kathryn, Phil, it's been a genuine pleasure. I hope you've had a good time. Thank you all for listening. I hope you've had a good time too. But I haven't got an outro line really, Cam, so you have to just cut this, I guess.